Have you ever wanted to take photos like this and this, but most of your photos end up looking like this and this? Well, I'm glad you clicked on this video. This is the Canon S80, and this video is a guide on how to get the most out of it. A lot of these tips will apply to other CCD sensor cameras, so listen up. Wait, what is a CCD sensor? Well, I'm glad I asked on your behalf. A CCD sensor is magic. Newer cameras come with CMOS sensors, which are fine, but CCD sensors just have a really special, flat, nostalgic look to them. So then, how did I get this shot? Well, the main thing with this one was obviously the fact that I used the flash and that it was nighttime. That's a pretty common tip with digicams, and you probably already knew that you should be using the flash at night. What I think is more interesting about this photo is that I set the exposure compensation down and I preset my focus. Huh? Well, exposure compensation is something you can do on pretty much any digicam, as long as it has P mode for program, or maybe they'll call it something else, but on this Canon S80, I have it in auto mode right now, and if I press this little exposure compensation button, has a little plus and minus, nothing happens. But if I chuck it in P for program, all of a sudden, pressing this button reveals a little menu that I can use this wheel to adjust. And generally, I'll set it right around -1 for one stop of exposure down from what would be considered correct exposure, but you can play around with this. The reason I do this is because digicams like this one generally do a really bad job at collecting a wide range of light. So in this case, I generally prefer underexposed photos over correctly exposed photos. In many cases, when your digicam thinks it did the correct exposure, it's actually going to blow out some of the highlights, such as the sky, which I honestly don't find appealing. Some people may, but I would much rather preserve my highlights than preserve my shadows, so then I set the exposure compensation down to accommodate this. On a camera like this, you can also play around with manual settings by chucking it into M mode or any of the priority modes, but honestly, I don't mess around with this because on a clunky interface such as this one, it is just honestly a nuisance, and I would much rather set it to program and then set just the setting I want. So when I set the exposure compensation down on this shot, that ensures that the basketball net, which is white, and my subject will not be overexposed, and that the black sky around them will be completely dark, which helps separate the subject from the background. For this specific shot, I also preset my autofocus. This means that I basically grab the focus from somewhere else in the frame, in this case it was the basketball net, by half pressing the shutter to focus, and then I reframed the shot for how I actually wanted it framed. This basically guarantees that something in the shot will be in focus. If you rely entirely on autofocus in the moment, and you just wait for that right moment and press, you're probably going to miss the shot. Autofocus on these things is pretty slow and pretty unreliable. So generally, if you're taking an action shot or really any shot, just get in the habit of grabbing focus where you want it or where the camera can find it and reframing your shot from there, and then full press. Speaking of pressing the shutter, a big aspect of getting good action shots on digital cameras like this one from the early 2000s is timing, because some of these cameras are a little slow on when you press the shutter to when the shot is actually taken. So just keep in mind that there might be a delay and get some practice seeing what that delay is on your specific camera. On this S80, it's fairly fast, but it still takes some adjustment to get used to. One super cool thing about the Canon S80 is that if you're in program or any of the manual modes, you can press function set in the middle of the dial here and go to a effect menu where you can effectively set color profiles, and you can even set a custom color profile where you can change things like contrast, sharpness, and saturation. I personally wish you could change color tones like warm and cool. You can do that in white balance, but I wish it was just baked right into this, so that the white balance can be auto. But anyway, I don't really use this feature. Some people love it, some people don't love it. I'm one that just doesn't really use it. I just put on effect off, which is standard colors, and I think the colors out of this are just amazing the way they are. But if you're into that, if you're into shooting black and white straight out of camera or vivid colors straight out of camera, then this is a great option for that. So here's another shot that I got on this camera. I really like how the shot came out, and I think my process for getting it is kind of unique. So basically, instead of like stopping and holding steady for the shot, I decided to keep moving and have my subject keep moving, but use the flash to illuminate, even though it wasn't that dark outside. It was dusk, and basically that meant my shutter was going to be open for like 1/40th of a second or something, which can allow some motion blur into the image, which is generally not great. But when you use the flash, the main exposure, I guess you could call it, is taken when the flash illuminates the scene. And then if there's enough light after the flash illuminates the scene, the camera will capture a little bit of like a motion blur effect, which is something that I don't see done very often, but any camera with a flash, whether it's built in or an add-on, you can do this with. So I've done this with my Fuji X-T3 with an added on flash, and I've got some cool shots like these. But you can do the same on a Digicam like this. This is another shot I got with the flash, and you might be seeing a pattern here. The flash on these cameras are generally their biggest strength. A lot of the nostalgic Digicam photos you'll see were taken with a flash, because it gives it that interesting subject separation, but still a very flat look. It's beautiful. Basically, if you just get the focus right, underexpose a little bit, and force the flash to be on, even in daylight, you'll get a pretty cool shot. And by the way, some people are not gonna like underexposing their images. Some people might even want to overexpose their images. Feel free, do whatever you want. Just, this is how I get my images, and this is what I prefer, but yeah, go ahead and experiment. And this Canon S80 is a wonderful camera to experiment with. It's compact, well built, and has some decent controls. Speaking of controls, one thing I figured out recently that I should have known much longer ago was that if you're really close to your subject and it's not quite getting focus, put it in macro mode. It's this little button over here on the left of the scroll wheel, and it has a little flower icon, and it puts it in macro mode, which means you can get much closer and it'll still allow you to focus. But make sure you take it out of macro mode if you're going to be further from your subject, or else it's probably not going to focus. With this specific Digicam and many others, you can also zoom for your images. I would generally leave that at the widest setting, which is actually quite wide on the Canon S80. I think it's about 28 millimeters. A lot of Digicams are going to be around 35 mil, which is also solid. But I really like this wider field of view that you get out of specifically the Canon S80. So yeah, I would highly recommend this if you're into well-built CCD sensor, great colors cameras for under $100. I got this for $60 on Facebook Marketplace. But yeah, that's my tips for now, and enjoy experimenting with your Digicam, whatever digital camera it may be. But if you specifically have this one, I hope I could help you. These are great tools for just getting fun and artsy images without really breaking the bank. And I've got a bunch of other Digicams too, so if you want to see more videos like this, drop a comment, leave a like. You know the drill.